Hello and welcome to the Destination LoRaWAN webcast series. Thank you all for joining us today from around the globe. I'm Alper Yegin. I'm the Vice Chair of the Board and Chair of the Technical Committee in the LoRa Alliance, and I'm the Vice President of Advanced Technology Development in Actility. I will be your host and one of the speakers on today's webcast. Today's topic is focused on LoRaWAN security, discussing security as a whole from the network to the end device. Before we begin, few housekeeping notes. This webcast is being streamed through your computer. There is no dial-in number. If you are having any audio problem, it might be due to the internet connection you have. And if the audio or the video freezes, please push F5 on your keyboard to refresh the page. And for the answers to common technical issues, click the help box at the bottom on your screen. There's an application, you'll find the help button. And at the end of the presentation, we are going to have a Q&A. And there's a Q&A box on your screen. Feel free to submit your questions during the presentation, and we will get to them at the end. An on-demand version of the webcast will be available approximately 24 hours after this live webinar, and you will be able to view the webinar again and share with your friends and colleagues. Well, if you're interested in becoming a LoRa Alliance member, you can view a copy of the membership benefits available in the webcast resources box, again, which you'll find on the tool you are using right now to view this webinar. And for any questions, you can always contact admin@lora-alliance.org regarding the membership benefits or the membership process or anything else about the LoRa Alliance. And today's webinar is brought to you special thanks to our sponsors. Our gold sponsor is MachineQ, a Comcast company, and the silver sponsors are Birds and Charter Communications. We'd like to thank them making this broadcast possible. So coming to our webinar, as you know, the security of any wireless network or wireless architecture involves multiple parties, the end device and the network infrastructure and the communication channel in between the two. In today's webinar, we have two parts. In the first part, I will focus on the channel security. And the second part is about the end device security. And Christophe Buffat, who is the chair of Security Working Group in the LoRa Alliance and the principal architect in Kudelski IoT, will be focusing on the device security part. So let's start with the communication channel security. As you know, LoRaWAN is a wireless communication technology. And just like any other wireless communication technology like Wi-Fi, 3G, 4G, or 5G, given that we're not able to resort to physical security in terms of like walls, guards, gates, or dogs, we have to rely on cryptographic security. In the absence of physical access control, a number of threats become a possibility, such as unauthorized access to the network resources, spoofing packets, modification of legitimate or victims' packets, and eavesdropping on third-party traffic. And the remedy for such threats are done with the thanks to various tools we have, such as mutual endpoint authentication, data origin authentication, replay protection, integrity protection, and encryption, and all using cryptographic algorithms and cryptographic keys. And that's where we use cryptography in securing wireless communication. And this is just a general template that applies to all sorts of wireless communication technologies. And obviously, we have done the same by addressing all these threats on LoRaWAN technology, the link layer communication technology between the end device and the network, using the well-established methods and algorithms as proven in the industry. And in the rest of couple slides, I will be talking about how we achieve every one of these facilities within our link layer specification, within the LoRaWAN link layer specification, so that the security for the communication channel comes out of box for all your deployments. So let's first look at the security credentials. In order to perform mutual authentication between the end device and the network, we rely on a set of credentials being present both on the end device and a server called a join server on the network side. Join server is more of an authentication server that stores a copy of the device credentials. So between the end device and the join server, they need to identify each other. So for device, we use the so-called dev EUI as a global unique identifier. And for the network side, in order to identify the join server, we use the so-called join EUI as a globally unique identifier. And the two share a symmetric cryptographic key called app key. This is a 128-bit key. It's an AES 128-bit key. And every device has a device-specific key. So the same key is never used with any other keys using the same network or any other network. It is typically generated randomly. As such, even if it were to be compromised, that compromise would not affect any other device's sessions. So starting with the set of security credentials being both on the end device and the join server, we execute a mutual authentication procedure. And in the LoRaWAN world, in our specifications, it's called the join procedure, or another name for that is the activation procedure, which involves a round-trip handshake procedure that uses the device and network credentials and the shared secret key, app key, in order to achieve mutual authentication. Not only it achieves mutual authentication, but it also generates the so-called session keys, which are used subsequently for securing the link and also securing the application payload delivery end-to-end between the device and the application server. These keys are called network session key and application session key, and they are as well AES 128 symmetric keys. And now that we have these session keys, we proceed to use these session keys for securing the data transmission. How do we do that? Well, we take the clear text payload and encrypt that using the application session key. As you would remember from the previous slide, the application session key is shared between the end device and the application server. As such, it provides end-to-end encryption. And the encrypted payload is taken in to the LoRaWAN frame. And what we add to that frame are a couple other attributes. On one side, we add the device address in order to uniquely identify who the sender or receiver of this frame is. And secondly, a frame counter. And this is a non-repeating value that provides freshness for this frame in order to prevent any replay attacks. And then by taking the dev adder, frame counter, and few other attributes along with the encrypted payload, we use network session key together with the AES CMAC algorithm to generate the message integrity code, which provides integrity protection and data origin authentication as this frame is received by the ultimate destination. And again, with thanks to the frame counter, which never wraps back to the same value and which is never reused, we're able to have freshness so that frames cannot be replayed. So starting from the long-term credentials and app key, we generate the session keys, and we use these session keys in every frame, both in the uplink direction and downlink direction, to achieve all the bells and whistles you need in order to achieve a secure communication channel. And regarding the activation procedure, which is how devices get used on various networks, we have two variants in our standard. One of them is called over-the-air activation, which involves starting from the long-term credentials like the joinui, dev EUI, and app key. We run the join procedure. More specifically, the device sends a join request, receives a join accept, and then it sends an uplink frame to conclude the handshake. And through that, it generates the session keys. Now, we also have another abbreviated mode for activation called activation by personalization, where we skip over the activation procedure or the join procedure of this handshake and jumpstart the device with the application session key and network session key. Now, we do not recommend using ABP mode unless you really cannot run the join procedure. There are some very special cases or corner cases where the device cannot receive downlink, or where the device may have to be provisioned on multiple networks simultaneously. And these are like super corner cases. Under such circumstances, you may have to resort to using the ABP, the activation by personalization mode. But otherwise, in any typical case, we highly recommend using the OTA, over the activation procedure or the mode. And the reason is, with the OTA, you're able to regenerate the session keys, which provides more strength to your security. Instead of using the same session keys over and over again, or before you run out of the frame counters, you can always run the join procedure again and generate new fresh session keys. That's possible with the OTA. And also with the OTA, you don't need to personalize your device against a single network, where the ABP devices are personalized against a single network because the session keys get shared with that network server. And if you wanted to repersonalize the device, you would have to share the same session keys with another network, and that'll open the door for the so-called domino effect. If one network is compromised, the other network that got the same session keys will be compromised as well for those given devices. As such, we highly recommend you limit use of ABP to very special circumstances. With the OTA, you don't need to share. The session keys can be generated per network this device is using at any point in time. Another facility we have in our toolbox with LoRaWAN is the so-called firmware update over the air, in short, FOTA. Now, no matter what you do, for one reason or the other, you would probably need to upgrade or update the software running on the end devices. Maybe you will add some new features, or maybe you'll identify some bug in the application, whether it's a security bug or otherwise. You'll have to touch that device. Now, instead of doing this update by coming close to the device and then using a serial port or short-range Bluetooth or any other technology, with the LoRaWAN, we provide the ability to update the software remotely over the LoRaWAN connectivity. Now, when we talk about FOTA, actually, in the context of security, there are two dimensions to it. On one end, we provide the FOTA facility securely as well, meaning the firmware or the software downloaded to the end device, they get signed, so malicious code cannot be downloaded on the end devices. And the multicast delivery is integrity protected using a group key. So for efficiency, we use a group update using multicast for FOTA. And then we also, on top of that, we provide integrity protection for the unicast commands using device-specific keys. So we have a very tight, highly secure firmware update over the air procedure. So that's one side of the story. The other side of the story is FOTA itself is also a tool in our security toolbox. If you have to update the device in the field, you can rely on the LoRaWAN FOTA feature. So it becomes more like an insurance to safeguard your deployments against any bugs or absence of any features you may feel the need in the context of security or otherwise in the future. Through using FOTA, you can make such updates in the field. So if I were to summarize what we have, and this picture puts everything in the context. So between the end device and the application server, we have end-to-end encryption. And at different segments of the data path, one being between the end device and the network server, we have the link layer integrity protection. The term integrity protection is in short for having mutual endpoint authentication, data origin authentication, integrity protection, and replay protection. And on top of that, we have data encryption not only over the air segment, but also for the end-to-end segment between the end device and the application server. And then I also talked about the FOTA, which provides insurance for being able to deliver future updates on the end device, plus for any hardware level security, where if you want to safeguard the cryptographic keys and the cryptographic algorithms running on the end device, one can do so by using so-called secure elements on the end device. These are additional hardware components which provides equivalent hardware level security as you would have with the SIM cards with the GSM technologies. So through that, we not only have the communication channel security through our standard, but then you can also securely store and use the keys on the end device as well. Now, the secure elements are not necessary for all sorts of applications, but for the types that the adversaries have very high motivation to physically attack the devices, you can resort on using secure elements. Similarly, on the network side, the infrastructure like the join server can be using the hardware security module, which provides added hardware level security in safeguarding the device credentials and device keys stored on the join server side. And with all of that, we achieve communication technology security or secure communication channel, which comes out of box with the LoRaWAN specification as part of the standard as we have built it into the standard from the very beginning. And obviously, this is only one part of the puzzle. The other part of the puzzle of security is to have a secure implementation and deployment. And when it comes to the implementation, there is the end device side, and also there is the network infrastructure side. And between the two, typically the end device side requires more attention because most of the vendors and the network providers already know how to secure the infrastructure. It's an experience the whole industry has built coming out of Wi-Fi, 3G, and 4G. Now, on the end device side, we have a very wide ecosystem, and a lot of attention needs to go on, into the end device platform security as well. And this is what we have in the second part of our webinar, and this is where I stop and turn it over to Christoph to talk about the end device security. And then, like I said, we'll have a Q&A at the end, and we'll come back to any questions you might have regarding the part that I have just presented. And with that, the floor is yours, Christoph.
Thank you, Alper, for this recap of LoRa Transport Security. Welcome to this LoRa Security webinar. I'm Christophe Buffard, Principal Architect at Fidelity IoT, Chairman of Security Working Group at LoRa Alliance. So we have focused mainly on protection and backend link protection so far. With the new legislation rising in Europe and in the US, more attention is needed on the device side. The security is a wall, and even if the link is fully secured, the system can still be attacked, and if the device is not correctly secured. Of course, today architecture limits the attack surface to one device. What I mean by that is, if that one device is compromised, it will not impact other devices. It will not compromise the network. But the device, the service that use the device, or the service that this device feeds can be impacted. This is a demonstration that security needs to be addressed at the wall. The service can be compromised by a device without the need to interfere with the link. Protection if the device is not fully secured. I would like to take the opportunity to speak a bit about the Security Working Group, to give a few words on the objective of the Security Working Group. The main objective of the Security Working Group is to review the LoRaWAN architecture and protocols to identify potential security issues that may not have been considered in the initial design. As security is a constant evolving field, the group will be responsible for proposing an evolution of the specification needed for these evolving security topics. We need to discuss the security architecture, evolution, and the implication that this could have in the current architecture. We need to consider the external publications to identify any findings that require our attention to assess the seriousness of the situation and take remediation action if needed. Not all conclusions will be bring valuable information, and some issue found might be related to external factors, such as device implementation, that have nothing to do with the specification. We need to provide technical guidance to the member and the device manufacturer to help them implement the security in the device. We need to promote the already existing technical recommendation as well. I would like to set up a requirement list and framework that will provide a general security scope. Security is not only the encrypted connection between a device and the backend or its app server. The security should cover the connection between the various systems in the backend, and it should cover the security in the device itself and the device provisioning process, how the key are generated and stored, for example. As Alper explained, the segment between the various components of the LoRa system are secure, and in a constantly evolving world, a new approach, like, for example, zero trust architecture, needs to be explored. The zero trust approach is primarily focused on data and service protection. As security design is not one size fits all, we need to focus on the different types of devices and what security is needed for a different type of device. So I'd like to speak about the security lifecycle. So first of all, secure upon arrival. So a new IoT device should be ready for the use with no additional steps and no further configuration to be fully secured. Secure operation of manufacturer. The device should be produced according to a set of security practice and operations. This is to avoid any security breach due to compromised network, security, or lack of security process. The device manufacturer should comply with security standard best practice. Threat model research required. The threat and risk around the product use case need to be understood, and the security requires to match the use case need to be assessed. The device should not leak data. It should be resistant to gain of privilege, it compromise, and take control of the process or the account. Mandates breach preparation. So the device manufacturer should have the means to respond to cybersecurity incidents. Both countermeasures should be proposed and operational response in the eventuality that the device are hacked. Lifetime security upgrade. Device with a long lifetime must have a remote software update via a network download or a local software update via a removable medium to update new software on an IoT device to add functionality and to fix issue or secure the device. So the supply chain security integrity, the device manufacturer shall monitor security standards and any piece of software or library used to develop the device. The device software should be updated according to external library security vulnerability released. This is a very idealistic and theoretical approach to security, but we need to keep those principles in mind while implementing the new IoT device. So security is one aspect of the trustworthiness, and we understand that there is an overlap of security with other considerations, such as privacy and safety, reliability, resilience in many cases. In some cases, cybersecurity is an enabler of other things such as privacy and safety. In other situations, the implementation of security can affect privacy risk or introduce safety risk. There is no one size fits all because the view of the risk of these 5 aspects will depend on the risk profile associated with the use case, the environment, and the organization that is using the IoT device. These 5 core principles guide our efforts earlier to start at the very high abstract level when we start to formulate a cybersecurity scope in the working group. There are 5 principles. Anything we do need to be based on understanding. This is because the IoT device and the risk associated with that device is not only depends on the capability of the device or the behavior of the device, but also the development, deployment of the device, the environment of the device, and integration that the device might have on the use cases. And therefore, any approach we have to manage the risk is rooted in understanding on how IoT can affect that. So one size won't fit all. When we say IoT device, when we initially started out looking at the aspect of the IoT, whether it's the consumer or whether it be industrial, It is broad and encompasses so many types of IoT devices that we recognize that all there is not going to be one size fits all. As you might know, governments have made several initiatives to issue recommendations on requirements on cybersecurity. These recommendations or requirements on cybersecurity also cover IoT devices. NIST defines an IoT device cybersecurity capability core baseline, which is a set of device capabilities generally needed to support common cybersecurity controls that protect an organization's device as well as device data system and ecosystem. Many IoT devices interact with the physical world in a way conventional IT devices usually do not. Today, the NIST has released a set of documents that provide a scope for the device that needs to be compliant if that device is to be used by a US government agency. NIST provides publication and recommendation for zero trust architecture also. The European Network and Information Security Agency, an European Union agency dedicated to preventing and addressing network security and information security problems, is working on the Union Rolling Working Group plan to fix the objectives of the working group. This work is expected to be completed by September 2021. The ITS, Cybersecurity for Consumer Internet of Things, will produce the standard. LoRa Alliance is a member of HC and will be participated in this new cybersecurity standardization effort. The specification should be in the scope of the radio equipment directive and introduce data protection and privacy, protection against fraud, like financial and monetary, and a combination of hardware and software. The applicability of is any internet connected device, wearable device, child device, etc. The Commission is aware that security is new in the radio equipment directive and will impact many members in implementation and conformity assessment. Manufacturer, testing house, market surveillance authorities, service provider. They have a different approach than the US. The US has issued a set of capabilities, and this capability should be enforced for device delivery to the US agency, but not for the federal general consumer. Yes, but might be required later at the time to be determined. While in the EU, they would like to these capabilities on which the Commission is working to be enforced in a determined time, probably in the next 5 years. It is clear that countries are moving toward a regulation toward IoT, or more generally, connected devices. The goal is to secure the infrastructure and the consumer. Just a couple of days ago, the US White House issued an executive order asking government top agencies to work on a complete framework for 11 points that cover the information sharing about the threat modelization of the federal government cybersecurity. So provide a framework with definition and guideline of what LoRa Alliance expects for the device implementation. The goal is to protect all the key material and all the critical data and to protect the device. The security level is an ongoing work, and the definition and the name are still under discussion at the security working group. So I encourage device manufacturers to join this group so we can define with the device manufacturer this security level, their definition, and their feature. So today we're working on a basic that prevents basic attacks such as implementation, may have serious limitation and should be used with caution. Any attack made on the device affects the device only. A sound implementation that is adequate for IoT device confronted with casual risk. This level will require a T, a trusted execution environment. The T is an international specification. The API specification has been developed and published by global platform. The T is a secure state of the main processor in a device. It ensures that sensitive data and stored process are protected in an isolated, trusted environment. The T offers isolated, safe execution, authorized security software known as trusted application. These trusted apps enable the provisioning of the end-to-end security by enforcing protected execution environment of authenticated code, confidentiality, authenticity, privacy, and system integrity. Compared to other security environments on the device, the T also offers high processing speeds and a large amount of accessible memory. And then we have the last one, which is the best. a best-in-class implementation that enables coverage of all common use cases. Generally certified common criteria, this level will require root of trust, also known as the secure element, common criteria EL5+, a secure boot mechanism, will ensure the device protection. It will not be possible to inject or modify code to the device. And all G-tagged or test interface should be closed and allowed. We'll ask also the use of certified crypto library like FIT certification, which is mandatory for the US government agencies. It is worldwide recognized and the development lifecycle is not impacted. This certification or self-certification will not be a formal process. There are certification schemes that already exist, which are recognized. To name a few, we have ARM, TSA, like Platform Security Architecture, or CSIP, Security Evaluation Standard for IoT Platform, which is particularly interesting for its aim for IoT devices. It defines different security levels adapted to IoT platform requirements. CSIP defines 5 levels from a self-assessment base. The developer has to provide a simplified security target describing the security claim of the product together with the rationale why he believes these claims are met. Only minimal evaluator effort is needed. Checks on consistency and clarity of the self-assignment are performed to level 5, which require a common criteria evaluation against an EL4+, that is used for smart card, secure element, e-passport, SIM card. The level provides high level of insurance. These are more certification standards available. The security working group could eventually provide a list of recommended standards based on criteria such as specific use case and application. So there is, for reminder, security is key shall generated randomly and per device deliver and store securely. So dev UI shall comply to LoRa specification in respect of the IEEE OUI. Dev address shall respect LoRa Alliance's net ID, network ID allocation. Joinui, application UI shall direct region server with a legitimate IEEE OUI. Use trusted software and OS's security for sensitive app and use the best security level recommendation according to the use case. And ensure end-to-end wall stack security system. This is really the first level of security that we would like all the device manufacturers to enforce. This is basic recommendations, and we've seen that sometimes were not necessarily completely followed. And as a conclusion, today LoRaWAN security is strong, relies on proven cryptography. Security is a wall and is strong at the weakest point in the chain. It's time to focus on the device. The device is an important element of the security chain. To prepare a device to the upcoming legislation, we would like to help our members to help them to be prepared for that security, the new legislation, data protection and privacy protection, fraud protection, hardware and software protection. This area where we can help, and we will try to streamline the specification and provide the security that is expected in the next couple of years in the IoT world. Thank you for listening. So, and now I will hand over to Helper to moderate the Q&A session that will start right now.
All right, thank you, Christophe. So now we can turn our attention to the questions we have been getting in the Q&A box. So let's see. All right, starting with the first one from Jake. Question is it possible to move from AES-128 to AES-256 within LoRaWAN communication? So Christophe, what do you think?
So today the keys are AES-128. The protocol is defined as AES-128. So if we want to turn into AES-256, it won't be with the current spec. It will be like a later date, maybe if there is some requirement for that, and especially if there is a legislation requesting AES-256, but this is feasible, but it won't be backward compatible. So today, it's AES 128, and maybe tomorrow, and as the legislation is moving on and the new standardization is coming, maybe we will have the need for AES 226.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I mean, for the moment, AES 128 is sufficient, and moving forward, like you say, we have the ability to add that through specification revision. And also, when we talk about AES 128, this is the crypto we use at the link layer. Obviously, at the application layer, people are free to add an application layer security on top of the link layer, and they have the freedom to use AES 256 or other crypto switch as well.
Yes, indeed. And also, I would add maybe some today for the 128. AES 128 is very is good. It's strong. It's very strong. So one AES 256, I see that maybe for quantum cryptography or those questions raised when quantum cryptography would be available. But today, as long as we don't want to store anything for more than 10 to 15 years, AES 128 is very strong, so it's sufficient.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So the next question is from Phil. Phil Day. Does the device have to be able to persist the frame counter across reboots, power cycle, etc.? So as you had seen, we have two modes of activation: over-the-air activation and activation by personalization. In case of OTA, over-the-air activation, actually the frame counters can be reset upon a successful activation procedure. As such, the device does not have to retain the frame counters across reboot. After rebooting, it has the option to run the join procedure, run the activation again, and after which it can start from frame counter 0. Having said that, if the device wants to optimize this operation, and if it can retain the frame counter, then it could avoid having to run the activation again by preserving the security context across reboots. That is definitely at its disposal. Now, coming to the ABP devices, where they do not run the over-the-air activation, they shall not reset the frame counter to 0. Even across reboots, they have to retain the frame counter in a non-volatile memory, and keep using that after the reboot. Now, we have mandated that in the latest link layer spec version 1.0.4, because in the past we have seen devices resetting frame counter back to 0 after reboot without generating new session keys, and that opens up security risks. So we have fully prevented that in our specifications. And the next one is, does OTA consumes more power than ABP over time? Let me take that one up as well. So the OTA has the additional join procedure that involves sending a single join request message and receiving a single join accept, and then that initiates the join procedure, which can have a very extended lifetime, like days, weeks, months, even year or years. So it wouldn't really consume much more energy than ABP, and for its strength in security, we highly recommend using OTA unless there is a reason not to. For example, if you are running a device that is uplink only, which is a very corner case, then you wouldn't be able to run the OTA and you would be stuck with ABP. Or you might have some other very special corner cases that requires you to live with ABP. All right. The next one is the next question from Alessandro Morales. Does all the LoRaWAN devices in the market support AES 128 encryption? So, Christoph?
Yes, absolutely. Security is mandatory. This is built in, so there is no way that the device won't be able to support AES 128. So this is absolutely mandatory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is one of the strong things we have done, which is security is not an add-on. It's been built into the specification from the very beginning. So there's no option to disable security with LoRaWAN unless you're running a broken device. A device that is not using crypto security is not compliant with the standard and it won't be certified. It would be a broken device. All right, the next one is from Simon Arnell. Are there any joint server implementations that back to HSMs, or that I would guess the question is that supports or that are integrated with the HSMs? Yes, Activities ThinkPark activation, which is it's a joint server. It does support HSM. There's an integrated HSM with that. And to the best of my knowledge, that's the only one that I'm aware of. All right. The next question is from Phil Bay. A lot of devices still seem to come with an FEUI rather than a joinui, where the FEUI can't be used to resolve the name of a joint server. Can you talk about the difference in that case? So historically, what used to be called FEUI got renamed to joinui in the link layer specification. But in either case, it serves the same purpose, which is to identify the joint server. Now, there exists, and the joint server and the FEUI or the joinui as a globally unique identifier of joint server needs to be generated out of an IEEE assigned OUI, Organizational Unique ID. And we do run into some devices that are using randomly set joinuis. And that's a problem because when they are in a roaming situation and when they send a join request with a random joinui, the visited network cannot identify the matching join server to discover the home network of the device. As such, the join request can never be forwarded to the home, and device can never join the network under roaming circumstance. So we highly, as you have seen in Christoph's presentation, we highly discourage people from assigning random FEUIs, random joinuis. Instead, they should use identifiers that are assigned to their join server, which can only come out of an IEEE OUI block, and that requires the vendor or the operator to get such a block from IEEE. That's the only way we can ensure global uniqueness and a robust operation. Otherwise, random numbers cannot can just lead to random behavior and unpredictable end result for your end device. And in most cases, your roaming device will never find home. Christoph, anything you want to add?
Just to let you know that if the joinui is not set properly, your device will not be able to join the network, by the way, because basically no join server will be able to answer the request.
Yep. All right. And the next question is again from Phil Day. Can you talk about any security differences between LoRaWAN 1.0.x and 1.1.x? So let me take this question as well. In LoRaWAN link layer 1.1, we have some security improvements. The most significant one is instead of using a single root key, which we call app key, now we have two distinct root keys, app key and network key. So that root key separation gives us a full security realm separation between the network layer and the application layer. And all the session keys generated out of the distinct root keys, they live in their own realms. And that helps with the management of the root keys and the security domains or security realms. And along with the distinct root keys, we also fully separated the frame counter down. So we have one for the application layer and one for the link layer. And that having single frame counter down in the past created a little bit of complexity in the backend side for synchronizing the downlinks generated by the application server versus the downlinks generated by the network server. Using the same frame counter required them to stay in synchronization. Now that we have distinct frame counter down, they can manage their frame counter down independently without any synchronization between the two. And then we have also enhanced our key hierarchy. We have a now richer key hierarchy with a purpose-built session keys. We now ensure each session key is used only for one purpose, not for two purposes or more. And that's also a very good practice in cryptography that provides a stronger cryptographic protection for the use of those keys. And we also have a way to reset, rekey the LoRaWAN session without resetting the data session. In 1.0 family, in order to rekey, the device needs to go through the join procedure again, which resets the data session, including the RF parameters. Now we have the ability to regenerate session keys without disrupting any non-security related context on the end device and the network. And we have also adopted counter-based join nonce. So instead of relying on a randomly generated join nonce, which gets harder to keep track on the end device, now the join nonce in 1.1 spec is a counter, and it's easier for the end device to keep track. So we have, this is the list of security improvements in the LoRaWAN link layer 1.1 spec. And right now we are working on a revision of that spec called 1.1.1, which we are intending to publish by the end of the year. And along with that, just like we have done with 1.0.4, we will not only publish the link layer specification, but also we will publish the certification program and the reference implementation and the LCTT testing tool, all as a single package. So we would highly recommend waiting for that before moving to link layer 1.1 specification. Okay. All right, so the next question is FOTA available today? Let me take this one up as well. And yes, FOTA feature has been already published maybe like a year and a half ago at least. FOTA version 1, firmware update over the air. And it's been made available. Well, not only the specification has been available, but at least 3 or 4 vendors have implemented that and made it available. And meanwhile, we're working on version 2 of FOTA, which comes with some refinements. Okay, the next one is also related to FOTA. LoRaWAN spec doesn't define FOTA mechanism. Can you clarify? Mainly for recovery if FOTA fails. Okay, so the LoRaWAN, go ahead, Christoph.
Yes, for the recovery, if FOTA fails, I want to say that it's really depending on the design of the device, because we specify the FOTA specification, how to carry the information, etc. But there is no clear specifier. It's up to the device to recover from a failed FOTA. So usually it's done with two banks, and basically you're downloading and putting the FOTA in bank 1, for example, and you still have the old firmware of bank 2. So if you have any issue booting the device, you fall back on the previous bank. So this is kind of mechanism are, I would say, dependent of the device.
Mm-hmm. Right. All right. And then the next question is, what is the difference in terms of security between 5G and LoRaWAN? So what do you think, Christophe, about this?
So yeah, to make a short answer, so without deep diving into the cryptography, which is a bit different because 5G network or like in general like LTE network are using some private cryptography. The main difference is really the use of a secure element, which is the common criteria AL5 plus certified. So that's the major difference. In LoRaWAN, today we don't have such a requirement. And this is what I explained during the presentation, that we are working on the security level definition for the device. And I would like to introduce like multiple levels, and the best level, so the top level, I would like that top level use the same, the equivalent secure elements, common criteria AL5+. So in that perspective, that brings LoRaWAN security on the cryptography side almost to the same level of what you can find on the 5G or LTE network.
All right. Okay, question from Robert Sample. In an uplink-only scenario with using the AND nodes, why would we be stuck using ABP security features as opposed to OTA security? Well, the reason is for OTA, the end device needs to run a join procedure that involves the end device to send a join request and wait for a join accept. If the end device is uplink only, then the device cannot receive join accept to complete the handshake. That's why it would be stuck with ABP. But obviously, we do not recommend even using uplink only devices because ADR, the adaptive data rate procedure, requires bi-directional communication in order to optimize the use of radio frequency resources. So an uplink-only device would not only be stuck with ABP, but it will also be not able to use adaptive data rate. So it will have a very suboptimal use of the RF resources. But yeah, basically, join accept needs to be received by the end device in order to complete the activation. Only after then an OTA device would be able to successfully communicate. Okay, Keith Hill is asking, what's the relationship between the device EUIs and IEEE registered OUIs? I can jump on that one. So in our link layer specification, we provide guidance on how dev EUI, the device ID, is generated, and how the join EUI, the join server IDs are generated. And for both of them, the prefix of those 64-bit identifiers need to come out of, needs to be based on IEEE registered OUIs. So if I were to give you a dev EUI or a join EUI, you or anyone should be able to identify the vendor who put its own OUI embedded in that identifier. Well, that's not really the objective, but the objective is to ensure global uniqueness. The only way to ensure global uniqueness is to use a globally unique prefix. And that can only happen if the prefix, which is the beginning part of the ID, comes from an assignment authority that assigns a given prefix to a single company. That's what IEEE does, right? So we simply rely on IEEE assignment for global uniqueness. Today, the same kind of identifiers are used for example, Ethernet MAC addresses to prevent Ethernet interface coming from vendor A and another one coming from vendor B not to have the same Ethernet MAC address. The same technique is used. They both rely, Ethernet MAC address relies on IEEE OUI. So we just adopted the same thing instead of reinventing the wheel or starting a new registry. We just rely on the well-established, well-working IEEE OUI assignment registry. Okay, there's a FOTA question. Let me jump to that. LoRaWAN payload is around 50 bytes. Means FOTA will need many chunks and fragmentation mechanism and turn, and that will make FOTA complicated. What do you recommend? Okay. Well, so that's a correct observation. Well, the LoRaWAN frames are not always 50 bytes. Sometimes they're even less. For example, in the United States, in the US region, RF region, in the harshest RF conditions, the payload might be as small as 11 bytes. And in the most favorable RF conditions, anywhere around the world, the payload size can increase up to 250 bytes. But nevertheless, it's small, and that's why we need to have fragmentation. And then, so we have this fragmentation support. Okay, so we have this fragmentation support protocol that is built. Well, that has its own specification, and I wouldn't say it's really complicated. It's just an additional piece of protocol that you rely on, and it's the same thing with even IP, the internet protocol. You need to have fragmentation.
And you also have to guarantee that the. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, do you want to add anything, Christoph?
Yes, because you also, so that there is fragmentation and the protocol will rearrange the packet in the right order for you. And also one nice thing I think we should emphasize, and this is not always available and maybe not on a lot of network, is multicast. So basically, yes, you have a small payload, but you can upgrade more than one device at the same time. So basically, you can upgrade a set of devices that need to be upgraded on the same time. So you don't have to basically take bandwidth to upgrade one device and then the other one and so on, like it's the case on LTE. You can just send for a group of devices that you want to upgrade, and you can send once over the air and you upgrade multiple devices at once. So there is kind of efficiency. This is not available on a lot of networks.
All right. Let me mark this. Okay, so Mohammed is asking, join key is not specified in LoRaWAN spec 103. Isn't mean that you don't recommend device with the specification. I believe you're referring to join EUI, but as I was saying, join EUI and the FEui, they are the same identifier. We just renamed the identifier in the specification. We just renamed the identifier in the specification for it to be more representative. But otherwise, in terms of that identifier, both specifications are equally secure. But for various other improvements we had in 1.0.4, obviously we highly recommend using the latest linked layer specification, which is 104. Okay, and the Phil is asking, thanks for the answers so far. Thank you for the good questions. Just to be clear, is the FEui renamed to join UI only in LoRaWAN 1.1.0? Did that happen at some increment of the 10x? Yeah, actually, we have done this renaming in 1.0.4. So in 104, you will see join EUI. being used instead of FEui. Well, with that, we have reached the end. Wow, timing is near perfect. All right, are there any other questions before we close this session? I'm seeing no questions, and we are right on time. So, well, thank you for joining this webinar, and especially thank you for all the great questions. We hope you enjoyed it and you found it informative. And we welcome you to our future Destination LoRaWAN webinars as well. And with that, and thank you, Christoph. Do you have any final closing remarks?
No, thank you all, and thank you, Alper. Had a very good session. Talk to you soon.
All right, talk to you soon, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.